As Comet closed its doors today for the final time, almost 80 years on Britain's high street later, fresh concerns have been raised about the retailer's collapse. The Department for Business Innovation and Skills has launched an investigation into the handling of the business since it was bought for a token £2. When the electrical chain's administrators shuttered its remaining 49 stores, the taxpayer was lumbered with almost £50 million in redundancy payouts and unpaid PAYE and VAT. Our business and economics correspondent Toby Perkins reports.
Nearly 80 years in business has come to an end. Today, the retailer Comet is closing its doors, and these shoppers have come for one last bargain.
Welcome to Comet Tottenham.
The business has been hurt by the downturn and competition from rivals, but it's how Comet fell so fast since its takeover by Op Capita that's prompted a government investigation.
Well, the whole purpose of this inquiry is to establish exactly what went on. There are serious allegations about the way in which that company operated. I can't comment on them. We don't have full access to the facts. This is what this inquiry has been established to do.
The inquiry may also shed light onto the workings of private equity takeovers, financial firms that buy up struggling businesses on bargain terms.
It's here on one of the wealthiest streets in London, amid the big brands of luxury, that Comet's owners and its backers do business. But this very fact adds to the growing sense that the world of high finance operates behind closed doors and is increasingly detached from the troubles on the high street.
A company named Haley Acquisitions, backed by Op Capita among others, bought Comet in February for just £2 from the French firm Keza Electricals. They also received £50 million to help get Comet going again. And last month, with Comet on the brink of collapse, Deloitte tried to sell the business to recoup some cash. Comet had lost £95 million in the year through April. Now, Op Capita is one of the first in line to be compensated. They'll get around £50 million, despite failing to turn the company around. And they won't say whether they've made a loss overall. But Op Capita does say it will assist the government's inquiry. Financial firms like this aren't doing anything wrong, but some say they make the most of the law.
Since the 80s, private equity vehicles, investment firms of that nature have had preferential treatment by the government, and that has been ongoing for decades.
Do you think it's time to change that?
It's certainly time for the government to review this.
That comes too late, though, for thousands of Comet staff who've lost their jobs, and too late for the taxpayer left with the bill. Poppy Trowbridge, Sky News.
Well, I'm joined here by Toby Perkins, Shadow Minister for Small Business, who is one of the MPs calling for Comet's collapse to be investigated. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Look, businesses come, businesses go. What is it about Comet's collapse that has aroused your curiosity or suspicion?
I think, firstly, Comet's a really important name on our high street, and people will be desperately sad to see the company disappear. But I think, as your film has just laid out, the circumstances, them being taken over very cheaply, a £50 million dowry being paid to Capita when they went over, and just 9 months later, 6,900 people lose their jobs. The taxpayers left with a bill for £50 million. People are going to question what sort of a turnaround company it was that took them over. They knew they were taking over a company in a difficult environment, a difficult sector at a difficult time. So I think it's right that those serious allegations that are being made are properly investigated.
Indeed. Given that this company is supposed to be a turnaround specialist, Op Capita, it's burnt through £50 million very, very quickly, plus the company's own cash resources.
Well, indeed, and as I say, they've taken VAT from customers, they've taken national insurance and income tax from their employees, and £26 million of that never arrived at the Treasury. They've been left with a £23 million redundancy bill the taxpayer's going to have to pick up. So it's a pretty terrible situation, really.
Tell me about that redundancy bill, because I understand the case for it. It's not nice that people have no redundancy, but why should the public pick up the bill for a private obligation? I mean, if you were a self-employed businessman now and you went bust, no one would help you out. You'd be on your own, chum. But if you're a self-employed businessman, you've got to pay part of the tax to support this.
Well, I think that's true. I think the reality is that when you're self-employed, you recognise, as I was for 5 years, you're pretty exposed there. But I think it is important that the government recognise that when people who lose their jobs due to the collapse of a company lose their livelihood through no fault of their own, that there is some sort of safety net there. Obviously, it's not a hugely generous one, but there is some sort of safety net there for those members of staff.
But isn't there a moral hazard here? If company managers know that this is the case, well, then they can just zip through the cash, be perhaps irresponsible, not do the right thing, knowing that their staff will be looked after by Joe Mugg, the taxpayer.
I mean, that's an interesting point. I think one of the things that Labour is calling for is that the whole regime of the way that the insolvency programme works, when insolvency practitioners identify that there's been companies who have acted irresponsibly, they filed D1 reports to the Insolvency Service. An investigation that we've done in the Labour Party shows that 10 years ago, 45% of those D1 reports led to directors being disqualified. For a whole variety of reasons, that's down to just 21% now. And we're saying the Insolvency Service should be taking many more of these cases forward, because not only is the taxpayer being left out of pocket, not only are innocent members of staff losing their livelihoods, but other companies, the creditors, are often being dragged down by these irresponsible practices.
And it's often small companies who perhaps rely on the customer of these very big businesses who go under at the same time.
Exactly, and many very responsible companies have been dragged under by the irresponsible practices of other companies. And when Ed Miliband said that we need to relook at the way that we do business, I think this is a great example of potentially irresponsible capitalism operating as it does at the moment.
I'd like your thought on this. What really struck me was that the private equity vehicle set up to take over, acquire, I won't say buy because it didn't pay anything, Comet, that now is a secured creditor, so it's going to get the bulk of its money back. The unsecured creditors, according to Deloitte, won't even get a penny in the pound.
Right, exactly, and this is why we need the investigation to see to what extent it was irresponsible, to what extent they were simply victims of market conditions, and whether there is anything that needs really investigating. But we need to be very careful in all of this. The British insolvency landscape in many ways is admired by other countries. We have a much better record of turning around businesses than they do in Germany and in some other countries. So we need to be really careful. We need to make sure that if there were any irresponsible practices, they're investigated. We need to make sure the Insolvency Service is sufficiently resourced to actually look into some of these cases, and we're saying that it hasn't been under this government. But we also need to make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and lead to a situation where turnaround becomes harder in this country than it is at the moment.
Indeed. Toby Perkins MP, many thanks. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
Well, the Queen has become